Good evening. Many of you were wondering where I had been when I suddenly returned to air here at CBS 44 earlier this year. And after a long road of recovery, I'm finally ready to share that journey with all of you. I'm Brian Roche, and join me as we take a look back on over a year-and-a-half journey. We'll take a look at what caused it and the people who were close by me throughout this road. My name is Brian Roche, and for years, I've been welcomed into your homes to bring you the latest stories across Southwest Georgia.
Because local matters, in Albany, Brian Roche, South Georgia Television News.
However, my life was permanently altered one July night in 2021.
We were on vacation in Hilton Head, expecting to come down that Friday, the 23rd of July. And we got an emergency call while we were out at the pool that you, Brian, needed emergency surgery and we should get to Albany as quickly as possible. We didn't really know much else, but it was a very long 6-hour ride.
What had happened seems simple enough. I had collapsed at home, but with one difference. I was unable to feel anything from the chest down. It was only after being transported to Phoebe Putney Hospital that I met neurosurgeon Dr. Hector Soriano and was told the worst news. I had suffered a spinal cord injury due to an abscess that had settled halfway down my back. I met him in person on my own for the first time since that surgery as we look back on the images of my spine that had left me on the floor of my apartment.
Well, spinal cord injury is one of the most devastating injuries that any human being can suffer, right? It fortunately is not terribly common, but when it happens, it's devastating for the patient and the family.
According to Dr. Soriano, as long as a person has a little bit of function in them following a spinal cord injury, it's ruled incomplete. That was not the case with my situation. Mine was ruled a complete spinal cord injury as I wasn't able to feel, let alone move anything below my chest.
We also use classification. It's called an ASIA classification, and it goes from A being the most severe to E being the less severe. You were ASIA A, complete spinal cord injury with a sensory level at T6.
When I finally woke up after the emergency surgery, I was greeted by my parents, with all of us being terrified at how uncertain the future now looked.
Like Dad said, we had no idea what our next steps were going to be. We kind of took one day at a time. You were then moved to the ICU, where you had wonderful doctors there, guiding us through getting you to the point that you were good.
Numerous tests were run on me in the days that followed the surgery to make sure there were no further complications. But just around a week after the surgery, we saw one of the best things we could have hoped for following that last week.
You got it.
And I talked with your parents, and I said, this is a good news. But we didn't want you to get too excited because it was very, very just flickering. So, but yeah, no, the moment I start seeing you that you start regaining some function, it was a great day for me. It's what every spine surgeon dreams of.
And while it may seem like the worst was over, I knew that my long road to recovery had only just begun. Tune in tomorrow when we continue the story of the road to recovery, only on CBS 4. Good evening, I'm Brian Roche. Last time, we looked into the cause of my spinal cord injury, the severity of it, and the incredibly small beginnings of my road to recovery. Today, we talk about my recovery efforts being moved across the state and the progress that will be made following a discharge from the ICU. In the days following my surgery to remove an abscess from my spine, there had been faint signs of optimism. A small wiggle of a big toe here, an effort to roll a thigh there. However, both my parents and I knew that something needed to be done.
We weren't quite sure what the next steps were, but we knew it was going to be a long road.
And it was after a session of physical therapy, we found out about the Shepherd Center in Atlanta.
We also had the opportunity to talk with one of the physical therapists at Phoebe, and she shared with us that she had a cousin who was injured and went to Shepherd, and he's walking and doing extraordinarily well. So that confirmed that we were doing the right thing for you.
2 weeks later, I was transferred to Shepherd, only for all three of us to be greeted with a very harsh reality.
And then we pulled into the parking deck there after a long 3+ hour drive. In the parking lot as long as you could see, and all of a sudden everything changed.
It would be on that day that I would be introduced to two women, my physical therapist, Lindsay Mayer, and my occupational therapist, Taylor Mangus. As we met for my evaluation, I laid out that I was hoping to walk again in around 6 weeks.
I gotta ask, is that just one of the most far-fetched things you think you've ever heard someone say who had just gotten out of a hospital bed in over 2 weeks?
We hear that a lot.
Yeah.
It's pretty common around here. You know, people come in, though, with their own timelines. You, though, were very motivated that you really wanted to get back to walking as quick as you can.
Unfortunately, the timeline was a pipe dream. The beginning was rough.
I could tell it was probably one of the worst moments of your life. It seemed like you were dealing with a lot emotionally and physically, and it just seemed like a really tough time for you.
Yeah, it seemed like this is probably, the hardest thing that you've had to go through. I think that you had told us multiple times, this is the most pain you've ever been in. A lot of stuff that you weren't used to, and I know that there's a lot of yelling kind of at the beginning, even just the thoughts of the physical therapist and the occupational therapist coming in to work with you.
A lot of thoughts, I can't do this.
And for a time, they were right. Every day felt like an obstacle as I continued to feel the most intense pain in my life. But nothing would compare to what became a difficult decision for me and my parents. Due to COVID restrictions at the time, only one of them could stay.
As much as we knew that you would want your mom there, we knew best for you was to have Dad there, because Dad understood all the medical issues and could advocate much better for you.
However, it served as a wake-up call that I needed to take ownership of the situation.
I think we've kind of tapped in and found a way to make you push through the pain eventually after lots of hard work.
Yeah, and that pain is something that's hard to get rid of too. I know we try a bunch of different things with you, trying to see if we can try to get that pain down. But it's tough at the beginning.
As the weeks went on, my demeanor and physical state were slowly but surely improving until I took that first big step.
2, 3. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, nice and tall. There you go.
Slow.
Much better.
Okay.
That's it. Bring those hips. Squeeze your butt. Bring your hips.
And to watch the extended cut of the story, you can visit our website, southgatv.com, as we bring you part 3 of The Road to Recovery, only on CBS 44 South Georgia.
Thank you, Brian.
Good evening. Last time, we looked at the beginnings of my road to recovery, which ended with me finally standing up for the first time since the emergency surgery. And today, we take a look at the crucial first steps that followed. After a month of nerve pain and physical therapy, I had finally taken a major stride forward.
2, 3. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, nice and tall.
I was able to stand up, and my ambitions didn't stop there, as I was still confident I would walk out of the Shepherd Center.
I knew that this was the start of a long road that was going to have a happy ending.
After nearly 2 months in Shepherd's inpatient therapy, I had finally been moved to their outpatient day program. It's there that I would meet one of my new therapists, Adam Young, someone who consistently told me about just how sparse the care for those with spinal cord injuries is, as he was working with me.
A lot of times people transition from an inpatient setting where they have a lot of assistance through other medical staff that is no longer an option once they transfer to our program, and our goal is to try and prepare patients and their family members for when they get home and feel as confident and comfortable with their daily routine.
As the weeks continued on, progress was being made. From from standing up in a harness to ditching the harness and starting to take some major steps forward. It might not have been much, and the steps were ugly, but they were my victory.
It was exciting to see how much you had progressed, but I don't think we realized how much further you still had to go. It was so exciting to see you walk that short distance with the walker. And you even tried doing steps, which was amazing. But like I said, we didn't really realize how much further you really had, that this was just a tiny little step in the right direction.
We were excited when you walked for the first time in your life, like every proud parent would be. I think we were 1,000 times prouder and happier and excited the second time you learned to walk.
However, I wouldn't be done with Shepherd throughout the next year, as my family and I would continue to drive down the East Coast back to Atlanta for a program they called Beyond Therapy.
It's an athletic model. It's, like I had stated before, 50 to 70% more intense than traditional therapy. It's not covered by insurance, so we're able to work on the goals that the client wants to work on. I always mention to everybody how well you did. Like when we first got here, it was a little bit of a struggle for you to adapt to our program, but you did, and you did great, and you progressed fabulously.
So it's more like, okay, how can we help you get through each session with some of the goal we wanted to achieve? It might not be everything we want you to achieve, but at least can we make some incremental progress? And then as your pain reduced and as you got more function back and you were able to do more and more, we were able to push you harder and you were able to push yourself harder.
Every time that I left Shepherd Center, I had made major progress.
Every time we made that trip back to Shepherd from New Jersey, they would always talk about how far you had advanced.
Until, on that third time I left late one April morning, I had finally accomplished what I thought I would do 6 months earlier and walked out. But the recovery effort was far from over. And as we continue to talk about recovery from a spinal cord injury, you can watch all the parts of the story in full on our website, southgatv.com. And don't forget to catch part 4 tomorrow, only on CBS 44 News. Good evening. Last time, we looked at some of the major progress in my recovery, from getting out of the wheelchair to finally walking out of the Shepherd Center on my own 2 feet. Today, though, we take a look at a major portion of my journey, one that led me back to my home state and a group of people who would prove pivotal in getting me back to where I needed to be. With my initial stay as an inpatient and outpatient at the Shepherd Center coming to an end, and a return not possible for nearly 2 months, my parents and I needed options, and needless to say, trying to stay in Georgia would do us no favors.
We said to you we would be better served being in our own house, where we have enough room for everybody. We would make everything work for you.
This would ultimately lead us back to New Jersey, and to a place that would be just as vital as the Shepherd Center was in my journey. Project Walk in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. A paralysis recovery center that had the benefit of not needing to go through insurance in order to receive physical therapy.
We are basically the next step after insurance releases you from traditional rehab program. And we go the next step.
It's there that I would meet many of the people who would work closely with me over the course of the next year and a half, from November of 2021 all the way to March of 2023. And it immediately earned an affectionate nickname from me from that first evaluation session.
There was a certain nickname that I had for Project Walk, probably as soon as about the end of my first week there. Project Beatdown.
Oh yes, the infamous Project Beatdown.
And a beatdown it was. 3 times a week, nearly every week for that time frame, I was getting pushed to my limit with the goal at first of simply getting out of the wheelchair for good.
I believe that you were the one who gave meaning to the term Project Beatdown, because even though I was there, facilitating all your, workouts and putting you through a program, you were the one who had to show up and give it your all, and you gave it 110% every single time.
And while I had continued to make progress throughout the year, I would be met with one large setback.
Unfortunately, with whatever was going on, with whatever went on in therapy, at one point you ended up with the beginnings of a stress fracture in your foot, which kind of took you out of therapy for a short period of time.
I had effectively been put back in the wheelchair, and my recovery was forced to be on hold for nearly a month as I could hardly stand up.
You know, I was just trying to think what we can do so you don't regress, so you don't fall back. Even though you had that setback, what can we do for your core? What can we do for your shoulders, posture? How can we continue you improving your overall body and fitness without kind of going back with that setback you had from the ankle?
It's thanks to working on those other parts that I didn't lose focus of my ultimate goal to be able to be on my own again. And once I was finally able to bear weight through that foot, progress would continue throughout the year, with each time becoming more of a challenge.
Watching you constantly push yourself, even when you know, I saw it in your face every now and then, you're like, man, this is tough, or man, I'm getting a little tired here. You know, you push through, you know, you knew your limits, but you push past your limits every single time.
And by the time I left in March of 2023, I had a group of people who had seen me through the worst of my life that I could call a second family. And with my recovery nearly complete, there was one last thing to do before I resumed my life. And we'll conclude the documentary on the road to recovery right here tomorrow, only on CBS 44, South Georgia. Good evening. Throughout this week, we've looked across the journey of my recovery from a spinal cord injury, from the devastation of the surgery to the successes in rehab. And tonight, we bring you the conclusion of the road to recovery. As I said my goodbyes to family, friends, and all of the people I had met on my journey, I had one last thing that needed to be taken care of. Making sure the wheelchair that was made for me will go to someone who is going to need it.
As you always are, you're always thinking of the next person and how you can help them.
This led my family back to North Georgia, just outside of the Atlanta area, where we met a great resource. Friends of disabled adults and children preparing to donate a barely used new wheelchair to someone who would need it far more than me.
Those are very expensive wheelchairs. They're not just $100, $200, they're thousands of dollars. And so they wear out as well. And so that's another battle people have with Medicare, Medicaid, or other benefits.
And sure enough, following the donation,
after nearly 2 years, CBS 44 welcomes back reporter Brian Roche. He was on Lake Blackshear this morning.
I was back at the station where I was a mainstay of the news staff. And that brings us to today, as I continue to try and push myself harder to further my recovery on my own again. But with the long, painful road of recovery now in my rearview mirror, I can't help but think back over the course of those 18 months.
You've always said from day one, like, I'm going back to work. Like, I don't care what it takes. I know the timeline was different than what you had anticipated, but we're just so proud of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we knew you could do it.
Yeah.
You know, we saw kind of where you were, the strength you had. We saw the great support that you had around you, and we knew that you were going to keep working hard. Because when you're determined, you're going to keep going, you know, until you reach that goal.
You want the patients, all the patients, to have that energy, that will to keep going and going and going uphill until they finally plateau and start enjoying the results. So you were an inspiration for multiple of my patients.
And I've been doing this for 26 years at this organization. There's very few people I've ever heard of. No one's ever come here and had that story, but you never see people go completely with a spinal cord injury from a power chair to walking completely.
We both want the best for you, and that helps just kind of allow for that connection to really push and motivate one another. Me to motivate you to try and push yourself, and you to motivate me to try and find ways to really challenge you.
But not just the people who've helped me through this most difficult time of my life, but what we believe can be done to help give just a little hope to those suffering from a spinal cord injury.
I think hope and prayer is what gets you through it. You have to have hope. You have to believe that things are going to be okay.
Set small goals for yourself that kind of lead up to the bigger goals, but it's important to have those check marks in place so you can really measure your progress and see, hey, I am getting better from 2 months ago.
Never give up. We never know. You'll be told a timeline, but we never know that timeline. And just keep up with your health.
Yes, it's very physically taxing, mentally taxing, emotionally taxing, but at the end of it, seeing the progress of the patients or clients of those who have suffered any neurological injury or spinal cord injury outweighs your hard days. It makes it all worth it.
You can get stronger. You can improve your quality of life through intense activity, sessions, and it just helps everything. It helps your brain, it helps your body, and just don't give up.
I would just want them to know that they're not alone. There's people who have been in their shoes before, and that there's options out there for them to regain and just regain their life back, and get back to the life that they had prior to injury.
As my mother used to say, it's not what you go through, it's how you come out of it that matters. And that's what we kept focusing in on, was the prize at the end.
I have far too many people whom I've met along this journey to thank for being a part of it, from doctors and nurses to the therapists and specialists to the others dealing with spinal cord injuries whose stories I heard throughout my own journey. I want to thank everyone at Marquee Broadcasting for allowing me the forum to tell my story. But I want to thank all of you for allowing me to share that story this past week and give insight into a condition that has seldom been talked about. Thank you.